Biodiversity. We hear a lot in environmental talk about the loss of biodiversity, but what is biodiversity? First of all, diversity is the number of different species in an area, or the number per unit area. For example, the number of herbaceous plant species per square meter of an African savanna, or the number of bird species in Costa Rica, or all of the insect species on Earth, tens and millions of them. All of these things describe diversity. Diversity is important because it indicates the variety of ecological jobs or roles and all of the different genetic variety that exists in a community. Another word that goes along with diversity is abundance. Abundance refers to the number of individuals of a particular species, so kind of like a population. Diversity and abundance are really important concepts because they're related to each other, and communities with high diversity often have few individuals of any one given species because there are many different species sharing all of the available resources that exist. When you have too much abundance of one species, the balance that we talked about in the last chapter becomes out of whack. Most communities contain a few common species and then many rarer ones. It's pretty astounding to think that there are over 14 million estimated species on this planet. That's different species that exists on this planet. As a general rule, species diversity is greatest at the equator, and then it drops as you go towards the poles. Though the number of species is lower near the poles, the abundance of a particular species can be very high. So in the Arctic, there are very few insect species overall, but the abundance of one or two, especially mosquitoes, is almost incalculable. In the tropics, on the other hand, hundreds of thousands of different insect species coexist. Highly specialized forms and behaviors allow them to use very, very narrow niches in the environment, but at any one location, only a few individuals of a given species may be able to survive or exist. The same pattern is seen in trees of high latitude boreal forests versus tropical rainforests, and in bird populations. In Greenland, there are 56 species of breeding birds, whereas in Colombia, with 1/5 of the area, there are almost 1,400 different species. Most of this has to do with climate and the length of growing seasons. The warmer the climate, the more diversity that can be maintained. So what is happening to our biodiversity? Why is this something that gets discussed so much in environmental science classes? Well, the idea is that human activity is decreasing the amount of biodiversity. And scientists understand that the more diverse an environment is, the healthier it is, the more stable it is. So having a wide range of different species is really, really important indicator of how healthy an environment actually is. When we do things like introduce invasive species or habitat destruction or illegal hunting, all of these things, diseases, cause species to die. Not only does the abundance decrease, but if you're talking about a species that didn't have a high amount of abundance or population to begin with, it can lead to actual extinction or the complete disappearance of any given species. Biodiversity gives us a lot of things. It gives us medicine to help us. It gives us raw material. So by getting rid of or losing or decreasing the amount of biodiversity that exists, us as humans lose out on potentially life-saving chemicals, and the environment as a whole, or the ecosystem as a whole, becomes compromised and not able to withstand things like, for instance, weather disasters or famines or droughts or things like that. The more biodiversity there is, the more that an ecosystem can survive those types of catastrophic events. The less diversity, the less likely those ecosystems can survive. So by looking at why diversity is starting to decrease, is going to be an important aspect in trying to figure out how we can stop this process from happening. This week, you're going to look at two overall concepts. You're going to look at the idea of how species actually form. You're going to look at things like, why does the Earth support the astonishing biological diversity that we see around us, and what determines which species will survive in one environment or another, and why are some species abundant while others are rare. You're going to look at how species form, how they evolve, and then the second piece is going to look at what happens when that diversity declines and what are the things that are causing our decline in biodiversity.